Because without awareness and without knowledge, what do we have?
Mm.
Without awareness, without knowledge, we can't understand ourselves, let alone us to understand anybody else.
Hi guys, this podcast explores the importance of our connection, well-being and mental health. To reason with someone is to motivate them to do or accept topics, ideas and issues through discussion and having conversations. This podcast is for those that want to raise their awareness, change their perspective or just have a good time. My vision is to help people find reason to live, to grow and to understand. I do that through this podcast as well as counselling individuals that want to help themselves.
No, he needs to know.
I just think he's gonna talk and it's gonna make a lot of sense.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
One man, one podcast. 3, 2, 1.
It's time!
Let me introduce Lou. Lou Lebentz is the founder and podcast of the Trauma Thrivers, alongside running a hugely successful Facebook group which helps educate people about complex PTSD and how to thrive through trauma, rather than simply just surviving. Lou has been a psychotherapist, trauma specialist and EMDR clinician for many years, and a new focus for her is empowering women in how to connect with and own the value in their voice through the online program she's now focusing on. She's designing it to empower women to speak up, speak out, and be heard both around their story to reduce the stigma on their trauma, but also give them the power of finding their voice to set boundaries and feel safer in the here and now as well. I can't wait to have Lou on. I'm hoping that you guys enjoy it as much as I do. All right, Lou, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good to have you. I know we've been trying to do this for a little while, and I'm really grateful that we're able to do it today. So thanks for being
I'm really pleased too. It's lovely to meet you, Jackson. Thank you.
Yeah, finally. It's not in person, but this'll do.
We're so
cool.
used to it now, aren't we? After
Yeah,
the last
yeah.
year, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the people are still literally going like, you're on mute. Like, surely people are getting the fact they're on mute these days, but no, we still continue to struggle with the Zoom. Yeah. So, Lou, start by just telling me, who the hell are ya? What the hell do you do?
Oh, crikey, that's a big question, isn't it? I'm Lou Lebentz and I'm a psychotherapist. I suppose I would say I'm a trauma specialist, and I run a group called Trauma Thrivers on Facebook and have my own podcast as well called Trauma Thrivers, all about how to more than survive our trauma. And I've been a therapist or a psychotherapist for about 20 years. Maybe even a bit longer. And my specialism used to be addiction. So I worked at quite a well-known hospital in the UK or rehab called the Priory for about a decade. And then I left there, went into private practice and discovered how much trauma sits underneath everything and even addiction. And so trained in EMDR. And I would say really the last 7 or 8 years, I've been focusing on complex PTSD and childhood trauma. So that's it in a nutshell.
Right in the good stuff.
Yeah, right down to the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that about you, Lou. I think the addiction background, sort of the same thing for me is, I didn't realize trauma was the way until I got into addiction. And realizing that all these, big grown-ups, big kids going, I just have this really unresolved stuff that's going on for me. And that's why I use drugs. And I was like, it all makes sense. It must be this thing called trauma that I'm starting to understand. So
it's so true. And kind of also for me in my 20s, I didn't really even know about addiction. So in my 30s, I kind of found out about my addiction. So in my 20s, I did all these weird and wonderful and wacky things that we try and do to solve our own issues. And then it was only in my 40s that I really discovered about trauma. So kind of in my 50s now, finally, I'm like, yeah, God, if we could just help people save those couple of decades and just go straight to the trauma, think of all the time that you'd save.
Yeah, and thank God we got
Yeah.
people like you know, having those little light bulb moments to go, this is what it's about. Let's, you know, go for it.
Yeah.
And I
And
think,
people like you too, hey?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think I'm definitely trying to just, I guess, learn from all the wisdom that keeps being shared, which is awesome. But yeah, I appreciate that. I think this work is so nice, and you know, no matter what you've you personally throw yourself at, is you're always going to bring a certain something to it that I think is really unique. And um I think, you know, your videos on when you do share on your Facebook page sort of bring that uniqueness out, you know, it's just really nice to see. So
Thank, thank
when
you.
I mean, we could go in any direction, and I'll probably sit
We
and talk to
can.
you for a really long
Anywhere
time.
you like. Yeah.
But I guess this work is hectic, right? And you know, I'm sure that you've learned that more and more and more. Sort of probably what led you towards the trauma is, you know, if I just go into here, then maybe it doesn't need to be so chaotic for some people. But I guess day in, day out, especially EMDR as well. And I guess start there. Like, for people who don't know what that is, what is that
Okay.
in a
I'll
nutshell?
try and give you as succinct an answer to that as possible. So, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I love how all of our therapeutic models are all like different letters or acronyms, and they're all really a mouthful, even for those of us that practice it to say it. I really have to think about the desensitization reprocessing part, but there you go.
Thank God
And
it's an acronym.
literally, yeah, literally all it is really is it works on something called bilateral stimulation. And bilateral means both sides, and it's both sides of the brain. So in a nutshell, we know that there's the kind of left hemisphere, which is the thinking part of the brain with the prefrontal cortex, and then there's the right downstairs brain, which is the limbic system and the brain stem, where the memories or the trauma or the amygdala are held. And in a nutshell, those two left and right hemispheres get out of sync. And what EMDR helps to do is it helps to, in essence, through the bilateral stimulation, and sorry, I always rock when I do this, which is can be walking, it can be running, it can be drumming. But in EMDR, we use either lights or a light stream that flashes, or tapping. Sorry, that's tapping, or acoustic EMDR, which is a beep, 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 beep in each ear. And whether it's ears or butterfly hugs or lights, it doesn't really matter. And sometimes you use all three. What it's doing is it's helping integrate what gets stuck between the left and the right hemisphere. So usually with EMDR, you'll go after an original trauma.
Yep.
So what you tend to do with EMDR is you take somebody back to what their issue is in the present moment, and you then try and find out when the inception was of that problem, when it started, and then what the belief is about the person because of that trauma.
Yeah.
So it might be something like, I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy, or I'm bad, but it's some limiting belief that's held on that traumatic event. And when they think about that and they feel the feelings in the body of that traumatic event, we then engage the bilateral stimulation, because in essence, what it's doing is it's helping to process the felt sense, what's in the body on the trauma, And as that starts to be dissolved or discharged, the kind of fight, flight, freeze energy, the left hemisphere and the thinking becomes much more adaptive, and we're able to dissolve the limiting belief.
Mm.
Does that make any sense? I'm trying to put it all into a 5-minute explanation of
Right. I
what it is.
think you did it in 2 minutes, and I don't think anyone's explained it in that way before, which is like succinct. And we could have gone in about 300 different phrases and terminologies that probably would have lost me. But yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And
Well,
hopefully,
if we think about it, Jackson, I mean, I don't know about you, but in the client work that I do, I know if I can get back to the original core wounding and process that, then the later symptoms and behavior start to drop away.
yeah,
So what I'm really interested in is working back to what we would call in the trade the attachment period, really, which is when we take on most of our limiting beliefs, don't we, about ourselves? It's kind
yeah,
of between that 4, 5, 6 years of age to maybe 12. And if I look at the less than functional behavior in the 20-year-old or the 30-year-old or the 40-year-old, I can often trace it back,
mm, mm,
to very much earlier on, to what they believed about themselves because of that event or that trauma.
mm. This is exactly why I wanted you to get on here, Lou, and talk about this stuff, because I guess where my head is at the moment is that a lot of people, where we talk about trauma, it's sort of something that's really known as a word now. Trauma informed practice for most practitioners or clinicians in the world is very known. And even for people that aren't in this profession, mental health, definitely in Australia, is something that everyone knows about now, everyone's very aware of. And even the term trauma is probably becoming much more common too. Where
Yeah.
I sit is trying to now bring it into the scope of what you're talking about in the world of treatment, is that we all have a message that was created, no matter
Yeah.
what. Even if you had the most pleasant experience on earth, you're going to have some sort of message that might be faint and little, but it's there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Without a shadow of a doubt, because we've got all types of trauma, and I think people don't really understand the word trauma. They hear the word trauma and they think, I don't know, a tsunami or a 9/11 or a one-off massive scale big event. And actually, you and I both know that trauma, and particularly developmental trauma, can be about not being seen really, or fully heard, or having an emotionally engaged parent, or being put down at school or bullied, or not having your feelings ever listened to. That in itself is a rupture in a dynamic in a relationship where a child doesn't feel worthy or doesn't feel good enough because mum or dad aren't really fully present. And
Mm.
we live in a world where mums and dads, I'm not blaming them, and I'm not putting all the emphasis on trauma on parents, as we have societal trauma and racism and sexism and every other ism is a trauma.
Mm.
And some countries hold far more intergenerational trauma than others. They're all held by our nervous system,
Yeah.
whatever they are. So I
Mm.
think there's all different levels of trauma, really, is what I'm saying. And a lot of people are traumatized, but don't actually even realize that they are. And,
Yeah.
going back to some of my clients, they don't realize that their parents drinking, or maybe their mum's marijuana use, or anything like that, is at all traumatizing to a child,
Mm. Yeah.
quite revolutionary for them.
Yeah, and they go, well, that's not as big as, old John Smith's over here, who's had, much more obvious and big things that we know about in this world, to be known as big things, like physical abuse, sexual abuse. Um, but they're just as big. I mean, in the worlds of
Well, yeah,
yeah,
and actually neglect is even
neglect.
bigger
Yeah.
sometimes, isn't it? Because then we're not getting any interaction at all. And I think there's quite a lot of research that shows, neglect is really traumatizing if
Mhm.
we're not witnessed or seen or heard. We're just invisible.
Mm, exactly. Which, as we see now, especially in the realms of addiction, whatever that be for you, whether it's drugs, alcohol, porn, sex, eating, um,
Yeah,
online gaming, online chats, you name it. If you've got a relationship with the behavior activity that you're doing, you've got that it's having an impact on your life. That's what we're talking about in terms of addiction.
yeah,
So, you
yeah.
know, it, that's you 30, 40 years down the track based off something that you were invisible for. Yeah, that
Yeah.
probably makes a bit of sense why you're doing something like that.
Totally,
Mm.
totally, totally. I agree with you.
So I have a big doozy of a question that I've got loaded, but I want to I want to know, before we crack into that, because I feel like it'll be there's a lot of weight to it. Um, how do you do this work? Like, where do you pull the strength to keep doing this, Lou, and be able to continue to do this sort of work with really vulnerable and, I guess, really um, uncertainty with people in their lives of what do I do? How do I do it? Like, where's the strength within yourself that you carry on?
Um, that's an interesting question. I guess that I personally think, and maybe I've changed my ideas over the years, but I personally think that if you have a community around you of other therapists, and if you're plugged into good supervision and good trauma informed supervision, and you have good self-care and you take care of yourself, I think those are really important aspects of working with trauma, and not to overload your diary and overfill yourself,
Mm,
because I think it's quite easy to get burnt out in this
mm,
role. And also, as you've seen for me, Jackson, now, I only do 3 days of one-to-one work now, trauma work, and that will be cutting down. um Now I'm in my 50s, that will be cutting down, and it will probably go to two and then one, because I'm of the belief, and I think my mission is, I want to make trauma treatment accessible and affordable to more people. And I don't know what it's like there, but here in the UK, if you have trauma and you don't have the funding for private
mhm.
practice,
That's it.
there's no help.
Mm,
So if you like, what keeps me going, and I suppose keeps me working on it and learning, and every client that I see, I learn from.
mm,
They might think that they're learning from me, and I hope in some respects they are, but my God, am I learning from everybody that comes to see me.
mm,
And I take that learning into the future for me, which is trying to design something eventually, and I'm working on it at the moment, that is trauma informed, that will be able to help people whatever their budget.
mm,
That's what fuels me to keep going, if you like.
mm.
there's
Yeah.
a kind of there's a kind of mission or a purpose or a legacy to the work that I do. That's what I feel.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. I think, just a few things that you say, having a community so important, and knowing, where you need to go to get that, I guess, stuff off your chest, or just, take that little bit of weight off. Um, Being able to just learn from the people that you see,
Yeah,
they're the masters of their story, right? So,
yeah,
there's
totally.
being able to learn from them, and then yeah, that's really powerful, being able to say, like, how do we make this known to all, that they can do the work, and that be accessible. Yeah.
And also, it's as we know, it's finding the bravery, isn't it, and the courage to do the work.
Mm. Yeah,
I
so it
mean,
goes full
doing the work
circle.
is not easy.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, and I think that that's really, really key, and it sort of probably brings me to my next question. It comes back to that. We use community and the understanding of this is normalized now. This is something that's okay to talk about. This is something that we understand. It's not taboo. That's what's going to allow people to step into this dark space of uncertainty about doing the work on themselves that makes it more available, makes it more
Yeah,
not as daunting.
yeah.
So that's incredible, and I think I hope you all the best in that journey, and I hope that
Thank you.
the community that you have is supporting you to do that as well, and because you're so right, it needs to be accessible to all.
Yeah.
Mm.
And maybe we are getting to a space in mental health where complex PTSD and trauma informed and all the rest of it, we start to see most symptoms and most diagnoses as in some way causal by trauma. So maybe community wise and country wise, we can start to have networks and people that get much more into the root of what's happening so that we can stop the intergenerational trauma being passed
Yeah.
down,
Mm,
you
mm,
know,
mm.
and never more apparent really than, for example, what's happening in Minneapolis in America at the moment, and Black Lives Matter. And, we have to stop the intergenerational trauma,
Mm,
and all the trauma that surrounds it, just being kept,
mm.
carrying on the continuation of it all the time,
Yeah. And I
you
think,
know.
I think to add on to that, I think what's been incredible for me is in Australia is our Aboriginal and Indigenous communities,
Mm,
and learning about the intergenerational trauma and all the history that's happened there is we that's how we see, and we get to have this like look in to see how intergenerational trauma works, and actually, I think it's created my understanding of trauma to be so much deeper because
yes,
in my own backyard, my own family tree, with all brothers and sisters and people that are around me, there doesn't need to be an Aboriginal Indigenous community to see that there's intergenerational stuff going on. My
yeah,
parents, my parents, you know, taught me what they taught me because of the way that they got taught, the way they got taught. And then before that, and if we keep going back and back and back, whether we're white, whether we're black, whether whatever we look like, is things have developed. We've come a long
yeah,
way in how we used to think things needed to be,
yeah,
and that intergenerational trauma in those Indigenous communities, I hope, is shining this light. I mean, definitely is for me to go, we all have that. No
yeah.
matter what we are having and a pass down of things that are then being kept. And until we decide, no, today I'm going to do the work so that my children and their children don't have to have this
Mm.
passed down thing that keeps happening to them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very powerful, isn't it? I think, I can't remember who termed or coined the phrase transitional character.
Mm,
That kind of person in the generational line that goes, do you know what? The trauma stops here.
I
The
love
buck
that.
stops here. Yeah.
I haven't heard that
Yeah.
before. Transitional
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Let's write that down.
Yeah.
Um,
I've nicked it from somebody. I just can't quite remember who.
But
But
now
yeah,
it's Lou,
yeah.
Lou Lebentz said it.
I don't know
Uh,
whether I can claim that
yeah,
one. So, but
probably not. But I do
yeah.
know, I hear that, and I like that.
And actually, for a lot of my clients, if they believe that that's what they're doing and they're changing the legacy and all the rest of it,
Mm,
coming back to meaning, that's a powerful meaning to have for your life.
absolutely. And it takes the, and when we talk about it in addiction so much, is that's that accountability. That's where we accept the things we cannot change, and
Yeah,
all that sort
courage to
of.
change the things we can,
Yeah, and I think
and
it
the
takes.
blooming wisdom to know the difference, eh?
Yeah, that's it. So that that's such a powerful thing, is if that's what my drive is, if that's what my like at the bare minimum, when I can't get up in the morning, I get up in the morning to know that if I'm continuing to do this work that's really difficult, I'm going to set myself up and the people that follow my legacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a pretty good purpose to keep on going.
Yeah, it is a really good purpose, isn't it?
So Lou, that's sort of, in a weird way, all of this is building up to this. I didn't plan it to be this way, but I guess what I want to understand, podcast is the way that it is. But what I'm interested to hear from you is why would understanding, for anyone, why would understanding our trauma, or whatever word we want to put that is, or our past or our history, and others, what's going on for others, so important for our mental health and the way that we connect with each other?
Oh, take a deep breath before I answer that one. Why is it so important? Because without awareness and without knowledge, what do we have?
Mm,
Without awareness, without knowledge, we can't understand ourselves, let alone us to understand anybody else.
mm,
And when we come at things from a trauma perspective, it not only gives us understanding, but it gives us compassion for
mm,
other people and why they're acting the way that they're acting. So if we put things through a trauma lens and a trauma-informed lens, we know why people go into fight. We know why they go into flight or freeze. We're understanding, we're looking at a human being as a human being, and not that their behavior is bad or wrong or whatever else it might be. We can kind of start to see that trauma lives within the nervous system and within the body. And once you get that somebody is not bad, it's a bit like with addiction. They're not a bad addict. They're a person that's attempting to self-soothe a history that is usually so traumatic and so
mm,
miserable that of course they're going to use drugs or alcohol. So I think we've just got to have that trauma lens out there on the world, because that is the mental health lens.
mm,
It is the nervous system lens. We are the combination of what's happened throughout our mind body system. And that's not letting people off the hook. We're not saying don't take responsibility for your own trauma, but we are saying try and come at it from awareness, from knowledge, from understanding, from compassion, because the more work you do on your own trauma, the less traumatized you'll be around other people, and the less trauma you're going to put out there in the world by being angry or reactive or defensive or unkind to others. Let's all do the bloody work, basically.
mm, mm, mm. And so well said, Lou. And it is such a big, big, big question and big thing that I guess our society needs to be able to swallow, which might be too hard and might be, too big. And how do we break that down? But I think that's why I'm asking this, because it's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying that really rings true for me. That you just slowly have this, whether it's a really complex history narrative that you share with somebody else, or it's just within your own internal monologue, but that I grew up in a family system that was this. I experienced this and this and this. And if it's not this big thing, at least it's like that probably makes sense why I'm a bit competitive at work. That probably makes sense why when people don't reply to me in emails, or people don't want to sit near me at parties, or whatever the hell it is. It's like you start to understand of this certain thing that categorizes me in the present moment. I can actually
Yes.
give you a tiny bit of narrative as to why. Now, if I
Yeah.
know that, when I see, and addition's always the best example, because it goes from, look at that junkie on the news that's just gone and done that again, to I wonder what happened to that person that's
Yeah.
made that sort of thing happen for them today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I can do that for myself, I can do that for others. I tell a lot of jokes with my friends all the time because they know what I do, and I'll just say jokes, and they'll, maybe they'll like argue with me about something. And I'm like, oh, it's probably a childhood trauma that we're arguing right now, and they go, oh yeah, whatever, that's a big joke, but really,
Yes.
maybe maybe it is but that
Yeah.
doesn't need to mean that something terrible has happened. It's just along the way, this is how I've decided that I need to be in a relationship, or I am where I am. And I think, that was nowhere near as clear and concise as you put it all, but
No,
what the essence is that's what we need to start
yeah.
doing. And gosh, it's gonna be a bit of work, but
Yeah.
you summed it up so nicely. If we can start to do
Yeah.
that, it would make such a big difference.
And we're doing it chunk by chunk, aren't we? Or piece by piece, bit by bit. So the more and more trauma informed society becomes, and the more and more people that do the work, or at least become aware of their own triggers,
Yeah.
and take responsibility for their own triggers and their own part in the relationship, rather than blaming everybody
Yeah.
else or the world
Yeah.
or you, or we all know people like that, right? That
Yeah.
won't own any of their side of the fence.
Mm,
So it's about ownership, really, and understanding. And then I think it's about metabolizing it,
mm.
because if we don't metabolize it and we don't let go of the beliefs or the trauma that's in the body, we're just going to keep acting it out.
Mm, mm. And we're just keeping the cycle going in that
Yeah.
intergenerational. That'll be my son's problem for him to figure it out, or my daughter, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
Um,
And no, because whether you're in your 50s or 60s or 70s, even, I've got a lady of 75 seeing me at the moment. It's never too late,
yeah,
because
yeah.
actually we can repair a lot of our work. Even some of the conversations I have with my mum now, who's 78, and I'm 54, some of them are reparative. Some of them go all the way back to that, my pre 10 years. And a lot of the conversations can be really reparative even now.
Mm, mm,
Why? Because I make her do the work. No, I
yeah,
sound awful. I don't really. But
yeah.
it's been, the worst thing to have is have a child that's a therapist.
Oh, yeah. God, yeah. Mom, if you're listening, I do apologize. But that's so true.
Yeah,
It doesn't
never
matter
too
what age you are to be able to
late.
do this sort of work.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you know, I think what you said is really great. Is we just start with little bits of awareness and knowledge. And
yeah.
even that,
And
just
even, even taking our hat off to the people that are listening to this today. I
mm,
mean, that is brave.
mm.
If you're listening to this podcast, I'm just going to talk to you instead of Jackson for a minute. You are already doing the work.
Yeah.
It takes courage to listen to stuff like this.
Mm,
This is going to be triggering, isn't it, for a lot of people?
mm. And that's the point. I mean, I didn't call it trigger with me, but it is reading
Yeah,
with me.
yeah,
Think differently
yeah,
about what's going on for you.
yeah,
Because honestly, the ultimate goal of this, Lou, and is if we can just start connecting more, we will be better.
yeah.
And doing something like this, you're in London, I'm in Sydney, and it's your morning, it's my night, and I get to connect and be with you right now. Like that's it means a lot to me, and I really appreciate that sort of thing. And the more we do that with each other, the better we'll be.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you.
Oh God! So let's just do 3-4 more hours of this, and really bore the people with our stories. But no, I will wind down as much as I don't want to, Lou. Um, You mentioned that, a big part of where you draw your strength from is, group supervision, or, having good supervision, having a good community, but you also said self-care. So what does that look like for Lou? Like, how does she fill her cup back up?
Well, I've got a dog, which you know all about, Jackson, who can be a bit challenging, but I live somewhere really great southwest of London. So it's called Surrey, and there's loads of like really, it's the Surrey Hills. You might have seen it on the we've got Box Hill, which is like this where they do the cycling for the marathon and all sorts of things, you know. So um, there's lots of really lovely restorative walks around here. I've also got some really great friendships, and lots of my friends, believe it or not, are therapists. So that's really, really helpful. And you know, holidays, I'm going off this Sunday to the beach. We're actually out of lockdown in the UK. Woohoo!
Oh, you
So
did
we're
it.
not allowed to, yeah, we're not allowed to stay in hotels yet, but we are allowed to stay in self-contained homes. So I've got a place on a beach for a week with about lots of land around it. So no Wi-Fi and no computer, and I shall just sit and read and play cards and dog walk and watch the birds. So things like that I find really restorative. Yeah.
I like the word restorative. I think that, it really describes how we can really,
Yeah.
I guess, fill up our cups again and
Yeah.
restore
Yeah.
what we need to be.
Yeah. And I think we have to be really mindful with boundaries too. You know, my boundaries, you know, being in recovery and you know, from trauma and addiction were never that great. And, you know, I'm a recovering codependent, so I would always do things to please everybody
Mm,
first. But I do think now, you know, I finish at a certain time and I won't put things in on a Sunday. And, you know, I'm much better with the boundaries around what I'll say yes to and what I'll say no to,
mm.
and not overfilling my cup.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
I imagine the answer is because you've done the work, Lou.
I've done a lot of work. I mean, I have done a lot of work since, you know, since I was sectioned at 25, you know, to a mental institution. I've done a lot of work. Yeah, yeah, with psychosis. But I think, you know, I started my work, I suppose, in earnest in my 30s, and it gets easier and easier and easier and easier. And I'm still doing my work.
Yeah, there's always work to do. And
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want people to say, oh my God, she's been doing it for 20 whatever years and still going. You know, of course, don't we? We get to being much more functional and happy and resourced and resilient and regulated and all those great R's. But, you know, I think there's always slight trauma that can come up to be metabolized, however much work we've done.
mm. Yeah, and I think, going right back to what you said at the start, Lou, is that message that we tell ourselves or we created that was indirect or direct when we were young, it's always going to be there. It's just about how we live with it and manage it, and it doesn't have to be the loudest voice in the room anymore if you can learn what you need to do with it. And that's
Yeah.
definitely my story as well. And I hope one day we get to do more of my
The other
story
way
and
round. We're
do
going
the
to do
other
a
way
swap
around,
thing.
do a little
Yeah.
softy. Because mine's very similar to yours. It might actually feel like the same thing,
Yeah.
addiction, codependency, all the good stuff.
Yeah. All the
Um,
good stuff, eh?
yeah. But yeah, okay, that's good. And I think boundaries. Oh, we could talk for a long time about boundaries and the importance of them. And um, I think that finding your way sounds like is such a good focus for self care. Finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, last question: what out of all the trauma books on the planet? I know there are so many gems, or non-trauma. Um, what would a go-to for you be at the moment?
God. Well, listen, I suppose I'm always going to say probably Bessel van der Kolk,
Hmm.
because I think, you know, I think The Body Keeps the Score is kind of the seminal book on trauma.
Mm,
But, you know, there are some other people out there that I love and whose work I always recommend to my clients. You know, even, you know, particularly because a lot of mine come with addiction, you know, of course, Gabor Mate, you can't
it's the
get by
king.
without reading or watching him, really, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Bessel and Gabor, and you know, there are lots of other people that I like and recommend. I even like Irene Lyons, somatic experiencing and nervous system discharge work, and Benjamin Fry's Invisible Lion kind of puts a lot
Mm.
of this into layman's terms. And Ariel Schwartz is good, and Pete Walker, and God, anything by Janina Fisher. I mean, I give lots of my
One, Lou, one.
that one. Sorry,
For 15
sorry.
later. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You're right.
Listen, it's a bit like I'm going to promote mine at the moment. I haven't actually got it here, but you know, um, there are so many different methods and there are so many different healing modalities, and I think that it's really about finding who resonates and what resonates for you.
Absolutely.
And I don't know about your journey, but I've done everything from, shamanic healing, although I didn't take the ayahuasca because you haven't watched my TEDx talk, have you? So
Oh, no, I got to watch
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I was spiked and I ended up in locked and section. So I haven't ever tried the kind of
Yeah, maybe not.
slightly alternative methods
It
to
might, it
healing.
might take a different turn than you want it to.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So, but
yeah.
I think I think I'm trying to say that whether it's sensory, motor, or somatic experiencing, or breath work, or mindfulness, or whoever you listen to, or whoever you watch, or get to like, is all layers, isn't it? It's all part of the jigsaw.
Mm. And let's definitely talk about what you've created. You have made it so much simpler and easier for people to be able to start to figure out what might work for them in your amazing ebook.
Oh,
um
thank you.
tell us where we can find that, Lou.
Well, it's free. So if you go to my website, traumathrivers.com/ebook, you just sign up there and you can get all the digital versions and the download versions. I'm old school, I'm afraid. So I'm not very good at reading online. So I've actually put it on Amazon as well, who do charge for it because obviously they need to print it and it's full color A4. So there is a link. It's called the Solutions to Trauma
Mhm.
series, and it's on Amazon, Lou Lebentz. And I think it's $18.99 because it's quite a hefty book. But as you know, it's got 56 different methods,
Mm.
all of different approaches, really, because there are, God, I don't know about you, I got really confused on my journey about
I remember you putting
what
it out
I'm.
to everyone, and everyone's like, "Well, don't forget this one, and then there's this one."
Yeah, yeah. And there's still like another 20 or methods. I need to do a second edition because everybody's going, oh, you missed out that one, or you missed out this one. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But you did. I mean, I guess, that's like, 100 books in one. You're giving us a little taste of a lot of them, and written in your way, which I think is a lot more digestible than a lot of those thick and hefty textbooks too. So that's definitely a good place to maybe not just start, even just like continue the learning as well.
yeah,
Definitely for
yeah,
me, when I read it, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's so good. So I think it
Yeah,
really
lots
does.
of clinicians are going, oh my God, I read it and I went, I want to train in that and I want to
Yeah,
learn
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid to finish it because I feel like I'll be like, all right, that's another, 40, $50,000 worth of
Yeah,
training for me to
exactly.
do.
Yeah. I really would just quite like to have a freebie session of all of those and
That'd be nice.
video it and
That'd be
then
nice.
put it into I don't know, a documentary for people.
Yeah, well, in case any one of those amazing people that created those models are listening right now,
Yeah, yeah.
Lou
Then
and Jackson are looking for some
yes,
free training. Oh,
please.
I I'm so grateful that you came on today, Lou. I
Lovely to meet
I
you.
have an inkling that we will do this again because
Yes.
I feel very connected to you, and I feel like we definitely share a lot of similarities, but also there's a lot to learn from you as well that
Yeah.
I really do appreciate. So, Lou, I will put all of your details through onto my website. And
Okay,
you know,
wonderful.
you can get to that ebook, you can get to the website. How do I get in contact with you? The Facebook Trauma Thrivers is for clinicians and for
Yeah,
non-clinicians
it
as
is.
well. It's,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, I would say it's probably aimed at those who are a little bit further along their trauma healing journey
mhm,
rather than right at the beginning.
absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Mm,
So, but for anybody that does feel that they are, please come join.
mm,
Yeah, yeah. I
um,
haven't quite got the resources to handle everybody at the very beginning yet, but I'm working on it.
mm.
So
And
it's just, yeah,
and
not
you know,
quite finished
it is
yet.
a huge community that is so helpful. So I don't doubt that there's a lot to hold there. So, and we appreciate that. Anyone that's in there, I'm sure I can
Yeah.
speak on behalf of them about that group.
Thank
But
you. Thank you. It's lovely
I
to have you there.
yeah, well, you know, I like being there. But again, I really want to thank you, Lou, and um, I'm keen for this to go out to everybody, and they can hear the nice little bits
Yeah.
of gems that you provided. So I
Thank
hope to
you.
see and hear from you soon, and
You
continue
will. You will.
watching all the amazing stuff that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really hope it was helpful for those that are listening and hope that we connect soon online.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about your story.
Oh, maybe you'll see. You'll see.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to find out more about how therapy can help you kick some goals? Go check out findreasontherapy.com.au or the Find Reason Therapy Instagram page.